Hello, I'm Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram, and this is fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 518. Hopefully, you've had a great Wednesday. I've got a great guest for you tonight. I've been looking forward to talking to this gentleman, San Luis Sun Grown on Instagram. Brett, how you doing? You want to tell us how you're doing today, and of course, where we can find you?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on the show, Eagle. Really appreciate the invite. And coming to you live from the San Luis Valley in Colorado, sitting at about 7,700 feet in elevation, and in one of the more, let's say, sunny and user-friendly agricultural valleys in Colorado that's put their target on cannabis. A little rundown on the county is, you got no building codes. You've got large farm tracts of farm. You've got plenty of water, and the sun shines 360 days a year here. Like today, the mountains up at Wolf Creek probably got 1.5 feet of snow, and we sat at 55 degrees in the sunshine and windy all day.
Sounds nice, beautiful.
Yeah. Good place to be hanging out, right? There's not many places in Colorado where you can set it up and get the right weather, and we don't have to worry about smell or any mitigation or regulatory problems since we're on 160 acres and everybody's got plenty of space. So it's pretty casual.
Sounds beautiful. So with that being said, might as well get right down to it. I like to this is the opportunity to get to know the people behind the farm, the Instagram, get a little bit to know them and why they do what they do. So with that being said, if you don't mind, would you like to share, when did cannabis enter your life? When did this wonderful plant grace your path?
That's a good one, man. That one might take up the whole time slot on the show with that question. Huh? Well, I've got some age to me, been at this for a while. Pretty much was born and raised in a cannabis family. Had some parents that made cannabis so normal that I grew up with not knowing anything about its its legality or being illegal. And I'm 52, so that takes us back into the 70s where, I first started seeing cannabis, or at least understanding what my parents had going on and their friends. And so in high school, it's a good story is that, ninth grade, you take all your friends, we all put our money in the hat, and my buddy runs into a trailer. I grew up in Montana and comes back with this bag. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And I'm like, oh, this is marijuana. I'm like, man, why did we buy this? I have it all over my house. And from there, the journey started. And so, you roll through high school, a lucky kid that your parents, have weed around their house. And so that put me in a favorable spot for an open lunch that we had at our high school, so it became definitely smoking sessions. And then right out of high school, I ended up moving to California to live with an aunt, a family member, and started just kind of hanging out. And then my real career kind of started as an adult in 87 and was put on my first outdoor grow in San Luis Obispo County. And which over time has been a great place to grow and hang out. But unfortunately, you know how regulations can be. Some of the counties that were great little hideaways for cannabis, didn't turn to commercial white market cannabis correctly. And that county now is a hard one for the people that have been living there for so long. But yeah, it's been a pretty big journey. From there, it just kind of rolls on to surviving the lifestyle and keeping things cool and being on the up and up, not being a nuisance going through those early days and not putting spotlight on yourself. And then lo and behold, you get white market and licensing and carrying compassionate acts starting in Colorado. And that's where I kind of made that turn in like 2010, 2011, 2012. Caregivers models started popping up, and we are brave enough to put ourselves out in public and, go to the towns, some small towns that I live in the Western Slope here, Colorado. And we're like, went to the Chamber of Commerce at that point in time. There's no state license. And so you're kind of really exposing yourself. If you had any kind of private thing going on in your life, as soon as you stepped up front to the Chamber of Commerce and said, you want to sell cannabis, they're like, well, where are you getting it from? Is the first question. So, getting through some of those difficult conversations and building some trust with the city and your county or whoever you're dealing with, we managed to put together some early dispensaries and did it all on the Western Slope in Colorado. Because we're like, oh, we're all Western Slope kids. And I don't know if people aren't familiar with Colorado, you've got an eastern side of the mountains on the Continental Divide, which is where Denver is and whatnot. And then you have the western side, which is, stoners and hippies hanging out at ski and snowboard resorts and just kind of living that lifestyle. And that's where we all kind of grew up and came up from. So we tried to do it all on the western side of the state. And we ran 3 dispensaries in 3 different counties for about 18 months, almost 2 years. And then once regulation hit, we realized that the counties we were in were super conservative and they voted not to go commercial cannabis. So that was our first big hurdle in the white market or the regulated scene. And it was a heartbreaking moment because, we were taking care of patients at that time. And we actually had a doctor, started working with us in our building, and then state regulations had them move out of the building and get into their own office. So it was completely grassroots, and we put a lot of heart and soul into that. And it took a bit of a beating when it came down to going to regulatory. They've basically everyone on the Western Slope, when it was voted in, they had a chance to, regulate it or vote it out. And a lot of the counties on the Western side decided not to. And we never had a chance to really activate, and we had to shut down the dispensaries, and it was a bit of a, hard turn. And so at that point, with friends and family and roots in California, we decided, let's just lift up and go take on the challenge in California. And we saw, the market and where it was going with the Prop 215 and 420 Act, and thought, well, let's just take another beating and let's go out there and give it a try. And, I've been out there ever since 2014 and working Colorado and California. But, I've faced every little piece of the journey along the way, and the plant's incredible. I don't want to lose focus on that with our conversation. I mean, that's what put us all here. It's done a lot of great things for me in my life. It's done a lot of great things for the people around me. And I think we're so into it right now because we're just trying to watch the integration of legacy operators, working in a platform where, funding is self-funded, and taking on the wrong capital can be a disaster, and watching the big capital companies come in and kind of muck up the water, but yet, give their go at it. So doing good. Otherwise, surviving California, thriving in Colorado, back to the San Luis Sun-Grown farm. It was one of those things where after taking a beating with the counties we were operating in, luckily Gunnison County is where I reside out of. The state said, for these counties that don't want to participate, they're going to cut the lifeline of the tax money benefits that they're getting into. So that changed a lot of minds on some of the counties. So Gunnison opened back up, and we came back into the state with just operating a lab. And we're like, well, we got a lot of friends that are farmers. We'll just come back in and get purchase cannabis trim and fresh frozen and whatnot, and run the extraction company and bring some brands that we created with out in California. We put together a company called Sur Extracts, and it was just a name at that point in time that fit the bill of kind of the lifestyle we like to live in. And we brought that to Colorado, and then a couple existing vape brands that were here and operated for a bit. And then lo and behold, you start to really realize the big squeeze on Colorado and the price of cannabis and difficulties working, even with sometimes your friends or legacy operators. Everybody is having a hard time taking on the challenges of, the new cannabis platform, and quite a lot of decisions that got to be made correctly. So that led me to be where, we got to get back to the plant directly, and the farm is where it all comes from. I mean, the farm is where you have everything that you're going to try to add value to or bring to the people, and any of these other ancillary, departments along the way to getting product to the shelf. And I was able to put together, a buddy of mine built this farm that we have now that you see on Instagram. And they kind of backed out of growing there, and it went through a few different buyers, and I managed to get my hands on it. It's everything I was looking for. I've always wanted a mixed light facility. I've built and run and operated a bunch of very manual light depth facilities before. We're pulling curtains and pulling tarps on the outside, and a lot of work, a lot of manual labor. And this facility is fully automated, cement floors and weather station on top of the facility. So it's pretty cool to be able to operate cannabis at that level, and after all the times of closet grows and, your first little high school grow up to your first garage grow to finally breaking outdoors and taking on those challenges. And then coming back to Colorado and building large indoor operations because it snows here, right? It's hard to plant outside and make it happen all year. And then greenhouse technology comes around and boom, now you got a greenhouse that works like an indoor room. And it's pretty damn cool to be able to manipulate the sunlight and flower through the middle of summer. And we're wrapping up a crop right now that's 3 weeks away from harvest. And, we just got 1.5 feet of snow in the mountains. So that is pretty damn cool. Pretty much like that. But yeah, man, I've been doing this a long time. So I could probably go on tangents all day from just survival times, but it's really cool to see how much attention's gone to the plant and always believed in it. I swear my whole team's heart and soul is in it because we believe there's this bigger things that can happen. And there's a story to be told with the plant that maybe the larger corporate companies and publicly funded large funds just can't get their hands on because they were never us or our kind of people anyways. But I don't want to separate segments. It's just who you are during the day,
I like to think there's the cannabis community and there's the cannabis industry. Cannabis industry are non-users and provide most of the capital, and then there's the cannabis community, which are users, growers, and like you said, it's just in their blood. They've always kind of been there, and there is quite the difference in the two. I feel, anyways.
I agree with you 100%. Bear with me. I'm going back to my Zoom camera. Just bumped me off. There we go. Boom. Yeah, you said it correctly there. Cannabis can do good for just about anybody. I mean, look at where it came from. What made it all possible for to do this was the fact that people recognized the medicinal values of the plant. And, a lot of that got lost during recreation. And, you see I have a lot of friends and family that I'll build particular products for because it suits their medical needs. And I do that because I have this access, but that most likely is a product that if I put it on the recreational shelf, the price and potency model will just not allow that to happen. So we've gone up against, a few. When we first put together Big Sur, it was we were just processing in California. And so we're basically just a service provider. Sitting in Humboldt County, that's a good place to be a service provider because at that point, everyone's gardens were significantly sized. And so when a farmer would show up and be like, hey man, I have this, couple truckloads of trim or flower that I want to turn into a product, what can you do? So we had our own menu of stuff that we could make. And because we're all enthusiasts and everyone in the company participates and uses cannabis on a regular, hourly, daily, weekly kind of schedule. So we ended up just calling the name. This came up with from the coastline area of Big Sur. And it's a place that we like to camp and surf, and spiritually is really a good place to hang out. So we just threw that name on there just to enter get into the Emerald Cup and hang out with the community a little bit, and kind of evolved into a brand. But what I'm getting to is that there's a lot of different facets in the industry. So you can find yourself starting one thing, and then we quit growing. My team did for a while, and just got deep into making concentrates and working on branding, and then found that to make better products and to do better concentrates, it all came back to the plant and the flower, and that you needed to be able to handle it yourself, know where it came from, know what was put into it. Picking up cannabis from a different farm every month was quite a challenge because, everyone uses different nutrients. Everybody has a different spray. Everyone has something going on. And lots of times they may not reveal that to you deep into the extraction. You're maybe smelling sulfur, or picking up on other things like that. And then you'll ask them, hey man, did you spray any sulfur? And of course everybody's like, man, we don't ever spray sulfur. But then where'd it come from? So, interesting road on just the, working at that level for that amount of time. And the characters that you work with are just a book in itself. I mean, you're hanging around there.
Definitely. So why do you think Rec's gonna make it over first? Do you think it's just the money that it makes cannabis, the recreational side of cannabis, the leader, and being pushed for?
So at me again, what was we kind of glitched a little bit. What was the difference between rec and medical? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking why do you think, basically, why, in your opinion, why do you think that recreational cannabis is leading the way versus medical cannabis that was unleashed first?
I mean, that's an interesting question and a very good one. I'll be real. I think a lot of it is when it was named medicinal, people kind of looked at it that way. And if you had to go get a card to then use it, it kind of built its own barriers with that alone. Like, it's funny, right? Because I grew up with a cannabis smoking family and using family. So to me, it was always around us. But then you have your family, right? Aunts and uncles and certain people in the family that would never participate. And, but then you see some of your family members get not a great disease or maybe some cancer or a child that does have a seizure or someone that could use the values of cannabis, and you'd see their minds change. But then it's really funny to watch it go recreational to now be like, to talk to kids that never saw, that are, 18 to 25 years old, 27 years old, that never saw the regulations we did. And they just know recreational cannabis is what it is. And so that access point, I think, just opens it all up, right? It takes away the taboo. It's now looked at in the eyes of, like say teachers looking at kids if they're drinking a beer, that it's kind of similar to that. Like, hey, if you have family members that think it's taboo, you're pretty much just like, hey, after 21 years old, you can go to the store and there it is. It's no longer what grandma used to think, that it was going to make you crazy or loopy or lead you to some gateway problem. So, I mean, I think the access really does it there. But what I think is the real bummer is the medicinal side is having a real hard time shining. And so then you look at the Farm Bill Act, right? Hemp comes into play. And it's interesting because we're a pretty strong chemistry-based company. And we do a lot of work consulting, building labs in multiple countries. We actually went over to Macedonia 2 years ago and with a translator and built a lab for just doing distillation and terpene extractions and building vape pens and active ingredients and whatnot. But we've gotten pretty deep into the hemp world because, cannabinoids are cannabinoids. And if you're looking at access and free and more open access to people, price is a big issue. And hemp grown at the scale that it is can really provide a lot of useful medicine from a medical level if some of these things can be allowed to continue. The fact that you can take CBD and transform it with a little bit of chemistry work into Delta 8 or Delta 9 or Delta 10, you could hit all three of the THCs right there from that molecule. And that molecule is readily available and grown at high scale. So you have a chance to really see this come back at a medicinal level, I believe. And the hemp recreational world had a big buzz in the beginning because people are like, hey, it's a lot like weed, but then it's kind of like non-alcoholic beer. Where's the buzz? So then Delta 8 comes by, right? People start making these conversions. You see this big explosion in Delta 8 products and smoke shops and people using the Farm Bill Act to get this product in front of many other non-regulatory smoke shops and stuff like that. And that regulation is coming down relatively swiftly, where you're seeing like a state like Colorado that was early to open up cannabis to everybody for medicinal purposes, but doesn't allow Delta 8 from the Hemp Farm Bill Act to be sold in the state. But yet we can do it in the cannabis we can take it right that's readily available in, our cannabis plant that we normally are, smoking from all of our favorite strains, and convert that to D8. But then you're kind of making a lighter buzz out of something that's heavier, but you get a more medicinal reaction. And so it's like, we can do that on that platform here in Colorado, but the price that it comes to, because there's some loss of the conversion and the fact that you're starting with kind of a high valued product, makes it really hard to sell. But yet it's a product where most of my friends that are in my age group that are very active skiing and snowboarding and biking and surviving knee surgeries and, just keeping your body real, trying to have an active lifestyle, is a really good compound to keep you up and moving, keep your anxiety down. Anti-inflammatory, really works well for your body. And so we've had a chance now where we have an actual partnership with a hemp company out of Florida called South Tip Hemp, and they're worth checking out. We do a lot of, we're treating hemp like cannabis with that company, and we have some really, really nice looking flower coming out of that program. And that's where I'm kind of pushing with the Farm Bill Act into more medicinal style products, where pain cream salves and backed up with capsules that are time release powder, where you have an 8-hour time release on some of these compounds. And I see a lot of folks from any age group, all the way down to like, I've got a niece right now, just at 19, just has some anxiety getting through her day, and cannabis is a little bit too strong for her. But when I put her on like a Delta 8 capsule or a vape pen, it's perfect for her. So, it's finding the right thing for the right people, but realizing that there's a huge picture in the plant, right? Hemp, ruderalis, cannabis, it's all goes down the same path. Cannabinoid production is cannabinoid production. Are you building something to smoke in the designer world? That means flavor and terpene profiles and a good genetics profile for people to know and understand. That's part of the game, but then straight up cannabinoid therapy, you can do a lot of that from the hemp side of it, but then can you merge these two together? Man, that's a big story that needs to be told yet.
So we kind of went over the Cliff Notes version. Sorry about that, of your story a little bit there. Let's rewind a little bit and hear a little bit about that first grow there. What was it like? What kind of strains were available in that first grow, and what kind of was it organic, sun grown? Obviously, it sounds like. And how did your grow skills transition from there?
That's a good one. It started off by watering plants for my pops. And, I'm not too sure how organic they were in those days, but it was pretty much just, there was no nutrients at that time, but you did see funny, different fertilizer things pop up here and there. And then you go to my first grow that I actually got into, that was after high school, and set out there. That was a classic outdoor California grow in the hills, drip line, plants stuffed underneath manzanita trees. And, that was back before strains were barely being named. You're like just hoping to get a skunk #1 plant or a bag of skunk #1 seeds. And if someone came to you and said, oh, that we have a cross with Maui Wowie, or we have some Kush, right? And there wasn't even a name to it. It was just, we have some Kush. We have some Afghani Kush. And it's interesting because, I grew up with a family that was involved. So I was growing from my aunt and my uncle at that point in time. And nowadays I show them the strains that we have, and they just can't keep up. But that was a straight up, bat guano, chicken manure, molasses kind of style grows. But commando, I'll be real, that first year out of high school, we had the classic helicopter experience and had to take down things early and kind of lived the dream, where I was like, wow, I heard about this and this is what it really looks like. And but it really kind of got me hooked, and from that point in time, I went from that grow, and I used that to get myself back to Colorado, do a lot of, put myself in a winter job. And it was like, that was 1987. right? 1988, when we're talking to start that timeline. And then Colorado, all of a sudden in 89, there's this store in Denver that pops up called Rocky Mountain Hydroponics. And we were like, wow, what's this all about? And lady was really cool who ran it. You could tell she might have had her own thing going on, but was really had to be careful because of, it was kind of like having your first head shop in a town. People were wondering who's going to that store and what they're doing. And same thing, Rocky Mountain Hydroponics had everything you needed to put a nice little grow room in your closet or your spare bedroom in your condo. And that was the kind of like the next step, right? Each summer I'd go out and grow in California, and I did that pretty much every year of my life up to this summer where I talked to you just a couple of weeks ago where we're harvesting again. But got our way into hydroponics and, really was kind of blown away where you kind of got to that point where if you ever went to the Epcot Center and saw some of the growing techniques of aeroponics and growing in rock wool. So it was extremely interesting, right? But then you got into grow nutrients and parts per million and dissolved solids and particular things that were completely different than growing out there in the hills. But always had a chance to share both. And I was fortunate enough to be living in a state for most of my life that you'd have to grow indoors and similar to what you got going down there around you right now, using lights, transferring air, using CO2. Before there was CO2 machines, you'd be mixing vinegar and baking soda, all the different things you could try to build up to these points, but always had a good steady root in growing outdoors. So I've been fortunate enough to where if someone tells me, first of all, you never argue about whose growing technique is better. First, you say, show me your bag of weed. And if you see something you like, you discuss methods, right? Because at that point, if you grew it in a homemade phototron that you built out of a garbage can and it kicked out a kind ass bag of weed, you definitely talk with that person and you pass on some knowledge. You might pick up a tidbit, right? And so I like to just kind of start all the conversations from there when you meet people. And the biggest thing about watching, I think, growing and going through the phases I have gone through is there's a lot of new growers on the scene. And this last 10 years has been amazing to see how many people have grow tents, working their 6 plants and getting stuff done and going through the different conversations and the network that's created with the community is something to just, I don't even know what other industry has such camaraderie where if you fit in with the community and it accepts you, that you can have all the knowledge you'd ever want to be successful if you know how to digest it. And that's probably the most special thing about the plant and what it's done and what it's brought together in a community. So that's probably one of my favorite parts, honestly, the characters, the people, where it brings you, who's working down the street, watching regulatory market open up and seeing who's at the courthouse getting a license. And I mean, it's pretty cool.
Speaking of like getting the licenses, thank you very much for being, one of the firsties for helping breaking down the doors, for the rest of the people. Every person that grabs the license, helps open the door up just a little bit further. So thank you for starting the process as early as you did, my friend. I greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Yeah, and that's funny is I thought I was coming in. I was always the young kid, right? And now I'm the elder in our group, and I like to see the new energy. And yeah, getting licensed is something else. I mean, like I mentioned earlier in the story, you start in this unregulated, like say, coming from the care and compassionate medical side, where you literally are exposing yourself to let the community know who you are, to finally seeing a license come around where it offers you some protection, and the ability to really go at it. All the times we were growing in those early days, you knew so many better ways to do it if you could just lay it out there in the open. And I honestly, when people ask me the difference in, the white market side, let's just say this new licensed recreational side is, yeah, we pay taxes. And Yeah, there are rules, but the point was we were all agreed in the old days, if you could give up the stress of losing your property or breaking up the band because there was the problem, that there's some things we could bend to. But the upside was you get to lay it out there and you get to use the methods and particular things that you saw in the day-to-day regular world to better your crop. And that was always the intriguing side of going to where it is now, you know, being able to put some tents down in your basement, not worry about it, and you know, and smell like weed at the store, and going to the grocery store and not using a fake name and actually using your bank card if you wanted to.
Them are great obstacles to overcome. Even a few years into it, I think at least I did. I'd go into the grocery stores kind of cocky and want to talk cannabis straight out, and they were still like, no, 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 tomatoes. I'm like, really? You know, it's somewhat legal around here.
Like the old
We
days
can talk.
going to buy your first bong, right? Your early days going to your first head shop. And if you called it a bong, they'd freak out, maybe ask you to leave. You had to call it a water pipe or tobacco something. But we all knew what it was for. But you're so excited to be in that store that it's hard to hold back sometimes.
Definitely. So I gotta ask, this is being one of the first people to get that legal license, is it just as bad of a worry? I know a lot of people here in Michigan drag their feet about getting a medical license. I don't want to be on that list. I'm gonna be on a list. You know what I mean? So with that being said, and it not being federal legal, when you got that license, it should be like, am I just getting on a federal like watch list by getting this license? Was that ever like a worry? Just am I getting on the big guys list by pulling this license?
100%, man. That was the first thing every friend said was, why are you doing this? You know, they're just making a list to come back and get you later. And you're like, no, man, it can't be that way. The cat is out of the bag, right? This is where it's going. My mom, you know, child of the 60s and 70s, different life growing up with cannabis and stuff like that, was just like, said, that was her speech to me exactly. Brent, you definitely are going to be put on a list. I don't think you should do this. And asked me a million reasons why. And then Montana had its first go, because that's where she lives. That's where I grew up. Had their first go at medical cannabis like a year and a half, maybe 2 years right after Colorado started pushing medical cannabis, and it was disaster. The local police and the governor didn't agree with the constituents and how they voted, and it was similar to Colorado, where when we first were heard of medical cannabis, but it was like, okay, great, what do you do here? How do you make this work? And people are like, well, you can open up a store. And it took like a couple first ballsy people to open up a store. Of course, that happens in like a bigger city relatively quick, right? Because stuff can get kind of covered up and people don't notice, particular stores other than them. But in a small town, as soon as you pop up a cannabis dispensary in a town of 5,000 people, they're like, oh, you're the weed guy in town. And so it definitely was nerve wracking, but in the beginning, we all knew what you weren't supposed to do with it, right? So if you just kept that plan and made sure that what you were doing was happening correctly through that store. I mean, the early days, I had these municipalities give me a lot of carte blanche, right? I was a decent citizen, had no criminal background record, and could speak logically and come up with a decent business plan. That was the point of me just saying, hey, give us a chance. If you don't like us, you can get rid of us. And first thing the city said was, well, you're going to have to find a landlord or a building that you own, or you have to find a location. And before they had a green zone set up. So of course you would have to pick the only place you could get a landlord or building to do that. We're always in kind of the sketchier sides of town, or, I'll be real, in Crested Butte, there is no sketchy side of town because it's a tiny little ski resort town, but there's no place to grow weed in the city. And the county didn't want cannabis in the county, but the city of Crescent Butte said, we'll have cannabis dispensaries. So we were growing weed in the county, and then the county voted that not to happen. So we had to then start growing, completely different county just to feed our dispensary. So, but those first moments were, you're just kind of so stoked that it was happening. And, there are some people that were straight up like, hey man, this is our time. And they put up signs and cannabis here and cookies and candies and drinks. And right away, what happens is here comes the rules, no advertising toward children. So some people could know truthfully like how to survive in the old world, how not to overdo it, even though you just got a license. Right. And that's, I think, a lot of the things I've seen as far as the holdbacks in cannabis and these smaller places. Or before it went recreational, it was all based on the operator, man. It was the operator who could work with the city to get their license. It wasn't even a license because there was no license from the state to give. They basically just said, we're going to let you operate until we either see you don't fit into the community, and they would just use the zoning law to get rid of you. So I think it kept you really truthful and humble. And if you kept your eye on the good part of the plant, that's what let us survive. But then there's always a few people that maybe get the dispensary down the street that, advertise a little bit too broadly and whatnot. And, there's always growing pains. You put something out in the community with really no rules, and there's a lot of different points of view that bubble to the surface with that particular situation. But where you're at in Michigan, I'll say you're in a particularly interesting spot because you've got good history in that state. And they came in with a medical situation that was like Colorado. You weren't sure if you should do it or get on the list. It was really unstructured. And then you have a change to recreation, which really made it a financial heavy lift to go from medical to rec in your state right now. And that's you're seeing kind of the bigger cannabis players come in to build out these infrastructures, but yet can they actually give a product to the community that is, that's sophisticated? You've got good cannabis users that know what they want and know good product in your state. So I keep an eye on Michigan quite a bit. I've dug around out there. We've got a member of my company who lives in Detroit, and we definitely have had a few companies approach us, but just didn't have the right infrastructure put together. And ourselves too have looked at, trying to put some property together out there. It just comes to bandwidth, man. California is a beast, and Colorado's relatively smooth. And I've got some friends that I helped start some stuff up in Washington that they handle themselves. But, it's a lot of action. And then add the little hemp company and some of the science projects we have with the South Ep Hemp Group. It really kind of chews up the time. But I'm always looking for someone, especially in Michigan, that, is just looking for a collaboration and needs a helping hand, and also just needs someone with experience that has gone through these trials and tribulations and isn't there to take over a company, but just be part of it, So it's kind of been my path, right? You teach a man to fish next to you and you do good together. And that's the community.
Definitely agree with that. Michigan is a great cannabis community. I myself, I kind of feel like Michigan is somewhat of the model that I didn't want to see with the recreational. And I guess every state that started off medical kind of says that. But it's just, there's just so many unfair things that has happened since rec has taken place here. They're continuously, of course, nabbing at the caregivers, which is kind of expected, I guess. But
You're right.
the main thing that like I said, I've always wanted or wished, I should say, that the medical would have swept first, because there is a sincere medical value in the cannabis as a medicine. There's also a whole lot of municipal value. And I think the most important part of cannabis is the cultivation side. There's nothing more empowering than a person that's sick and has a hard time doing for themselves. But when they can do for themselves and make their own medicine, that's a can-do attitude that extends into life and kind of makes your attitude a little bit more better about everything. But here, when rec came into play here, uh, they're automatically starting to try to take that away from us. But what happened here in Michigan, and this was the super sad side about it, is that I'm a caregiver here in Michigan. Okay, I'm allotted five five patients plus myself, which I have. I'm allotted 12 plants per patient plus myself. So that can add up to a possibility of 72 plants, which I have rights to or license to here. So, and with that being said, that's a fair amount of plants. But I'm only legally allowed as a medical caregiver to have 15 ounces. That's with all my patients' numbers added up at once. Usable cannabis at once, okay? And that's medicine for 6 people, okay? But I can grow 12 plants wherever, indoors, outdoors, separate from my medical, and whatever I can produce in my recreational garden, I have legal rights to. So if I could produce, and I'm just funsy numbers here, 50 pounds on the rec side, that's cool. Smoke it up, chief. It's recreational. But if I want to call that medicine, I'm in trouble for, trying to pass that medicine on to patients. And to me, that's kind of silly.
It
That's
is.
wrong.
That is, that what that is, that's just a product of the fact that they got started with medical. And as they started probably taking on feedback, and before they get to the point of really hearing from a guy saying, if I have 72 plants, dude, I'm going to have way more than 15 ounces of weed on me at some time, right? I mean, that's pretty strategic to fall underneath that weight limit and run as many plants and keep a regular harvest. I mean, but what happens is recreation hits and all eyeballs, boom, right on that, right? Because I lost a bet with I've got a son who's 27, and he's watched us all the way go through this stuff, and he actually bet me. I lost $20 to him, and he was 18 at the time when we were medical in Colorado, and it was 2 years later, I believe, they start pushing rec, and I'm like, man, no. And medical was a mess still, man. Like, we were like trying to figure out, where we could all put our zoning, the licensed plant counts, because Colorado's a plant count, state instead of a square footage. And we were working through medical rules, and then boom, here comes rec. And they're like, and rec had uncapped financial assistance, and medical was like, no one from out of the state could help you. There's a lot of restrictions on our side to where you're like, man, we're just going to get mowed over. So people instantly were like, well, when they're like, well, we're going to give you guys a year head start. So if you already have a medical license, you can go into rec. So then all of a sudden all the stores converted, right? A lot of people converted, really put the hammer on the medical side. And then it took the fact that the state had to give up some tax breaks, and you could have more concentrates on you, carry more weed if you had a medical card. There's rumors that you could get out of a DUI for the card, but I've yet to see that one happen, But what I guess I'm getting to is, like, when they move to rec, like, medical opens the door. That takes care of the legacy operators. That satisfies the care and compassionate protests of people saying cannabis should be decriminalized. And more than that, it should be allowed for, just like you said, me to grow my own medicine and have my right to do that. And then that opens the door to rec. And then rec comes in, and that's what you can see in Michigan. That's the topic, right? It's a big bump for someone who you're at the top of your caregiver game with having as many patients as you have and keeping it on the up and up, and running a business the way it's supposed to be run from the regulatory standpoint that you're at. But then look at your jump to rec in Michigan as a stout move, when really you should be the guy who gets first dibs on that, because you've already got a base of people and you know what you're doing, instead of having a bunch of people come in, make some noise in the industry, mess up the price index, make leases more expensive and all of that for the medical side. So I definitely will have to say, you know, I operate in the rec side, and I don't want to bite the hand that I work in, but we do work our butt off to make survival money. But it is not easy, man. It's amazing how the caregiver model was for us in Colorado at the time. We never, and same in California, you know, you weren't 280E wasn't involved yet. Nobody, you know, they hadn't really laid that out yet. But running a rec business, man, it's more than what people think. As far as, you know, you got to be sharp on your game in every move, and when you really do your taxes at the end of the year and you see how much money goes to not, you know, to the regulatory bodies, it's kind of mind blowing. You know, Colorado, I'm 15% excise tax on anything cannabis grown, and then 5% excise tax. That's for the state, 5% for my county where I'm at, San Luis County. So there's 20% right there. And then if I transfer weed to my extraction company, which has to be a separate license in a different space, that's another 5% leaving that city. So, you know, that's a 25% hit on something that I'm trying to make a move on. And I mean, some people live on margins like that, you know, and the goal is to give the customer the best product they can have at a price that's feasible. I mean, you can buy a 6-pack of beer for $7 or $12. You get to choose kind of where you want to live. But if cannabis is always sitting at $40 an eighth, and, you know, for the quality you want or even more, how many more users can afford to come into the platform? And I don't know, I see it like, can going to scale and rec help anybody? I think it's really going to help the consumer, because it's going to hopefully bring a price that they get. But I still see prices flexing hard on the cultivator, right? Our bottom line is getting pressed on a regular, while the price really is staying the same at the customer level. It's just the regulatory positioning. After a few years, you can't hide from it anymore, right? You got to pay your taxes. And then what really comes down to it is your 280E tax, you know, how to handle that trafficking non-deductible tax that comes at you. So, you know, there was an easy day back in the day for sure, but you had people trying to come get you, take your stuff, or arrest you. But now you can be out in the open, but you have to be a pretty savvy businessman besides being a good grower. And that's probably the most important thing right there.
Heck yeah, you guys got a lot more on the line than us little guys do. If I choose a strain that whatever, I decide to put whatever in my garden. If it doesn't pan out and it's not that good, well, I've got a few patients that might have to sit through it and tough through it around. But a person like you that's on the larger level there, if you guys plant a seed or a strain, you're banking on that. There's a lot of riding on that going all the way through, no problems. And then it's got to make it to market, and that's got to be the one everybody's calling for at the time. So you've got to kind of be trying to look ahead. You've got to, be playing the market a little bit. So how do you necessarily decide what's going in your garden? Do you choose necessarily by hype or fad, or do you stick to your guns and this is quality and this is what we're offering?
Man, I have to say, you got to put a little bit of what you really like and your heart's into. There's some older strains that I like to kind of still keep gravitating around me. Older is a concept, right? But like this last round, we had a rotten rosé, we had some tangitos, we had some ice cream man, grape lean, cherry dip. So we try to keep a variety going on. We like to definitely have some high potency THC strains, definitely something in that's going to be hitting past the 28s and trying to break 30 in total cannabinoids. But then we like to get into some designer flavored strains because we're a concentrate company. So we kind of fall victim to our own side when it goes to the concentrate side, to want to work with some with some flavors and strains that are going to maybe give us a profile that's a little bit more unique in the jar that way. So Colorado, I think we're hitting on a variety of what we like to smoke ourselves and what's popular out there. We're with this facility that you've been seeing on Instagram. It's, I've been operating we're on our third harvest. We came out of the guns blazing with that place, and we're growing in soil, no salts, all teas, top dresses of, and Rocky Mountain water. So it's a really fun project. The whole process itself there is quite a bit of manual labor. We're watering by hand. There's 1,008 plants in 10-gallon pots right now, sitting there today in week 4 or day 42 of flower, right? One really good dready friend of ours can water that whole place in 4 hours, and he's intimate with the plants. So we can really see if we're, being a greenhouse, you're going to have pests coming in and out. You got air transfer coming through. It's not HEPA filtered. It's a, 5,000 square foot facility with a large cooling wall. So it's hard to stop things coming in that are natural. We do have some hemp production in our valley. That's tough to deal with. We did see some russet mite action come our way this year. But deciding our strains, we're coming to the point now in Colorado where we're starting to get to the strains we like, and we'll get into our breeding program here, because, running the regular popular strain is great. But when you hit a log jam of saturation where we're at now, because it's fall and you're sitting on like a lilac diesel, and so are 50 other farms, it's nicer if you could move yourself into something a little more special that you could offer somebody. So eventually you get to your own breeding program and start to make your own crosses that are efficient workers for you, but also popular on the people side. So, and in California, we're running a dry farm. It's a full-on organic vegetable farm. We can't call it that the cannabis is grown organically because it just isn't spoken of that way, but it's properly done. And the farm doesn't use any water. It's on a position next to the Eel River with a 500-year floodplain. And when you plant vegetables, squash, sunflowers, cannabis, seeds go in the ground, they germinate, and then you never water. You don't even water them in. You just put them in the ground. And so there we have to work with genetics that are a little hardy. We need a lot of landrace genealogy into those plants, because they're a hybrid necessarily is not going to really work too well in those conditions. You sometimes basically just either straight indica or a stronger indica and a stronger sativa is what we're looking for, because you're talking about a field of cannabis that doesn't get any trellis. It doesn't get any protection from the weather. It sees the rain, it sees the wind, and it never gets watered. So there's some selections there that we can't just go to the regular seed store to use. It takes us a year or two to at least 2 seasons to bring in a new strain and then cross it with some of our historic strains that we have that are definitely all from landrace genetics. So we've got an ancient OG, which is be dead real. The property came with a bunch of friends of ours that were older school surfers and older say rebel cannabis growers in Humboldt County. So we have a pretty unique landrace strains that came with the farm years ago, and some friends that grew in that area. And it's a different scene to where you're not able to just go to a clone company and buy clones, because you have to use a seed there, because you need a hardy plant that actually has a tap root. And so a clone would never survive because the root can't get down into the water table. So it's a pretty unique style of growing. It's something we're checking out. That's Eel River Organics. It's another little gig. That's what we're running out in California. So we decided to work with dry farming because it's got the lowest cost of goods. It's got the most unique story that you grow in the ground without water, and all the amendments for your teas and foiler sprays are being grown naturally on that property. The horse's tail and your nettles and all of that is happening right there. So it's a really cool circle that goes on there.
Sounds like a perfect garden.
It's worth checking out. We might have to sit down and have a chat about that. Like, I'll get you to check it out. I'll send you some pictures of it. It's one of those things where it takes that perfect piece of property to make that happen. So, you've got a 12-foot row of sunflowers, then you've got a full row of cannabis plants. And these are anywhere from 6 to 12 feet tall. And it's growing naturally in the dirt, no water. Looks kind of like Nepal, Afghanistan, anywhere you start seeing like older desert style growing, but it's in the middle of the redwoods.
So, as somebody that's planted quite a bit outdoors, probably from clone, from seed, do you notice the difference, a big difference from a cultivar that is necessarily a clone versus the seeded version? In my head, if I were to plant a clone outdoors, I would expect a shorter, bushier plant because the root zone is more shallow and more bushier. You know what I mean? Versus your taproot that goes deep. I would expect a taller, larger plant from a seeded plant outdoors. Is that pretty much what I is that on point there? Is that what you expect when you're working for cloners from seed?
You're totally on point. And you can plant your clone outside and still get a 12-foot plant, very large plant. I think our theory there is if you want a 10-pound plant, you make a 10-pound hole, right? The roots are going to go there if the soil's good and it's easy for it to get there. But the side with the seed side is you end up with just such a different, hardier plant, right? The stem is stouter. The size of the stem at the very top of the plant, can be big around as a quarter going into like your top bud and whatnot. But it's that hardier skeletal structured plant that is required to make it through the season there. Like, we started harvesting October 5th this year and had about 8 days of nice sun. Got all the tops off. We had 85,000 square feet of canopy up this year. And so, took down about 3,500 pounds of wet just to go to dry. I'll give you the background on the garden since we are growing from seed. And so our phenotypes are difficult to deal with. So it's hard to really grow really good quality bud in the bag and a full-term garden, outdoor sunshine in California. Great cannabis, but then you got your mixed light people growing indoor quality with greenhouse. Then you got your indoor folks. So the farm basically just knocks out pre-roller material and concentrate. So we're foremostly a concentrate company out there. And so it came down to where we just needed to come up with the cleanest, best looking biomass we could. And when you look at dry farming, the unique side of it is that if you dig into it and look and the history of like squash or figs or sunflowers and anything grown underneath a dry farming technique tends to put out more oils. And that's because the plant's constantly struggling. It's always looking for its own water. It's never being fed water. We do foliar sprays, and that's it as far as its feeding side or just maintenance on the plant. So you definitely come up with this hardier tree-like plant that is nothing like you'd see indoors. And it's one, like this year I had a couple friends from Colorado come out and help take down plants with us. And they're completely blown away, when you're looking at a plant that, the top of the plant has a stalk on the very going into the top bud that is as big around as like a beer cap. And, you're just the water leaf stem itself could be as big as a vape pen battery. And it's not because the plant's a giant plant. It's just so hardy. This could just be on a 4-foot plant and still see the structure like this, or a 12-foot plant. So the seed, starting from seed, is pretty unique. But growing a whole bunch of cannabis by seed and, drops the problem on you of what do you do if you plant 1,000 ice cream man seeds and you have 15 phenotypes that you finally can organize. There might be 20 or 30 phenotypes, but you can organize 5 different categories of the same strain and then try to move them to people. And so it becomes difficult. So in the end, we were like, this is an incredible plan, but it kind of, the farming technique and the end product kind of steered us in a direction of being a concentrates company. And so we're able to knock out any kind of hydrocarbon, solventless, or CO2 product coming out of the facility there in California. Same thing in Colorado here. We're just converting into a volatile license in Colorado and pushing hydrocarbon extraction here in the Rockies. So
I can't tell you how much I absolutely appreciate the realness and the honesty of the latter part of that answer, because a lot of people don't. We talked about this the other night on the show, on the panel side of the show, is how guilty we felt, because a lot of us are still pheno hunting, and I pop a lot of seeds, and I am constantly weaning down the numbers to that one. And we were talking the other night on how guilty we felt by, like, putting together whatever we needed, and here's number 1 and number 2, you know what I mean? Here's part and part, or did the complete guilt we felt by, like, mixing the 2 together and just going, all right, here's that, you know what I mean? So I really appreciate your honesty about, because I hear a lot of farmers, yeah, we plant from seed, but they don't ever talk about, how there much variation they could be to the 1,000 seeds they've planted in the mixed bag that's necessarily going out in their crop. There's really no pheno selection going there. So I appreciate your honesty in acknowledging that and going, well, that's why we take the extracts.
right? I mean,
That's
for that, because like in Colorado, we don't have enough space, and we don't just throw out. We're going to pheno hunt the best we can in the conditions we have at San Luis Sungrown, because it's a mixed, being mixed light, we're limited on space. So what comes out, we want it to be banger, so we wouldn't plant clones are a great application there, because we'd like to have a steady army of robots doing what they need to do during their flowering cycle and move on to the next round, and keep it that tight. So you are pheno hunting and you're talking to your friends that have that one phenotype of the strain you like that is got a little tweak that works better your way.
I also appreciate
the
the
field
dry
and you
farming aspect.
Yeah, we're unique as hell, because we're at that point where we planted seeds directly in the ground, right? So it wasn't seedlings and we planted those. It was the old school method of every space, 2 seeds, right? Why 2? 50% chance there's a male, because we're not running a feminized seed, because you want that hardier taproot, and that tends to still be in that particular category. So, you're doing the old school, we're into it 2.5 months, 2 months into germination, and it's time to start sexing plants, right? The ones that aren't stressed more, they're going to sex quicker. And the ones that aren't, they're not. So you've got a unique day of, maybe planting 10,000 seeds, but pulling 2,000 males out, maybe 4,000 males out, and the goal is to plant 2, because you'd like to have a hedge. So if you're not running trellis, it'd be nice to have the plant hold itself up. So it's pretty fucking cool to have, I don't mean to swear on that one, but it's pretty cool to have the 2 varieties that you see from San Luis Sungrown to the Eel River Organics project that I have in California. And I try to keep variety, because that goes back to me saying there's no perfect way to grow cannabis. It's an application of what you're trying to do with the plant. It starts right there at the farm, starts right there in your basement, where with necessity and where you have to be able to grow, you're utilizing your space to grow the best you can with those methods that you have behind you. And everybody needs to look at it that way. Success will be much more when you can really look at it that way, I think, and getting the plant to where you want it.
I do believe the dry farming is a good way to produce some very terpy cannabis, to be honest with you. And I very much appreciate your grow method in the 10-gallon pots of the hand watering, like I do myself. So
Right.
I greatly appreciate that. So there is something about a little bit of that love and care and just that individual interaction that I believe what sets farms like yours apart versus the automated system where nobody ever sees or touches them just for necessary sake, I guess.
Right. That's like having your Star Wars figures still in a package and you can't play with them. Like, right. I had a hard time with that. Some friends that keep toys, like, oh yeah, man, we're saving those. We collect them. Like, how can you collect something and not have a good time with it? I don't know. The plant's there. You should get after it. But I'm a firm believer in spending time with it. Right. And your people that are growing the product and growing the plant, if they can spend time with it, they understand why they're making these decisions on what they're doing. And it's fun to take someone who hasn't grown before and give them a couple of cycles and see what they pick up. And like right now at San Luis, we've got a buddy of ours who's got all the skills needed to be a great grower at this scale. His attention is right on it. He just didn't have the opportunity. Grew up as helping the same thing as kind of my upbringing, helping his family, water plants and work for his dad and stuff like that. And now we've given him like his next badge up to like full Eagle Scout. He's there crushing it 5 days a week. But that's a fun little farm, man, to sit at 7,700 feet in elevation, and we get so much sun. We had such a great summer this year in Colorado. The water was great, lots of rain, lots of sunshine, and it's just kind of unique, Colorado's always been an indoor growing place, and yeah, you could put up a greenhouse and grow full term, but you're just kind of, that's what you got is a large full term plant. You can get to that indoor quality using the sun. So we've been kind of hashtagging mixed lights new indoor, and you have the capacity of really growing a high quality product and medicine, and utilizing less electricity, less footprint, and just kind of getting the hippie story and keeping it alive.
I think you may have foiled my next question, but I'm not for sure.
Let's hear it.
So you've grown in a variety of locations. Where has been your favorite location and favorite farm so far to produce some cannabis in?
So, I mean, I'll be dead straight. Is that I went up in 2016 with a couple of close friends, and we started a company called LeafWorks, and you can look them up. They're a pretty top moving group. And we went up to Wenatchee, Washington. On the eastern slope of Washington, and it's a high desert, and the altitude I think was like 56 or 5,700 feet there, so not nearly as high as we are here, so a bit warmer. Does see a little bit of snow, but it was just this climate that was so dry on the outside that the plant really did well through the roots. No humidity, really reacted to foliar sprays well. It grew a lot of cherries. We took a cherry orchard that was diseased with cherry blight, and that's what's taking out most of the cherry farmers there in Wenatchee. And we were the last farm to get in before the moratorium. Actually, our license was stamped the day they voted no more new licenses in Wenatchee County. And that story goes on a different way because we eventually got voted out of that county after 2 years of operating properly, and then had to move across the Columbia River to Grant County and have 3 tier 3s that are operating there right now. There's 90,000 square feet of outdoor that's cranking, and some great kids that really know what they're doing and growing the same way, growing with soil, using old school mixed light techniques of pulling tarps still on an 80-foot by 20-foot greenhouse box, and then still running the Field of Dreams with the, half of the license, which is just your outdoor crop there. My reasons for saying favorite is because the climate was perfect for not having molds, mildew, and microbiology work against you. And water, you have the Columbia River, and our wells were just fresh, clean water. the other kick is that it was just the right place. There was a lot of commercial ag going on there and a lot of cherry farms that were going out of business. So you had a lot of ag workers that were used to handling plants and trees and working in an industry like that, where we could actually bring people into the industry that maybe weren't cannabis orientated and actually were real farmers from a different industry, and get them to become cannabis farmers, because that was the next thing happening in the valley. So really fun. The most unique place is the dry farm, because that one's just has this endless potential to lay out whatever as far as our licensing will allow us. And right now we're sitting with about 300,000 square feet of license entitlement. But to be real, we can't even come close to growing past what we did this year, because we need a building to dry it. You know, people don't realize, man, if you're going to grow this much weed, you need now a building is, much bigger than your barn or your garage to dry all this. It's just getting things to scale and getting it to operate correctly. But yeah, the dry farm is by far the coolest thing that I've done. And I think year to date in my life, and the story and how it goes, and getting just to the roots of being a core rejuvenative biodynamic farmer.
I think that the whole process, again, I think brings out more in the plant. As you can see behind me, I don't like to provide a lot of support to my plants. I believe as the buds get a little bit bigger and heavier, and the branches, start to, I think as they do that, they're actually, that's a sweet spot. Unless, you got to save them before they make that snap. But if they can stretch and in that wind on top of that, you know what I mean? And then the dry part of it all, it's a sweet spot for cannabis. And especially if you're using that in particular, cannabis for extracts, it just sounds like a great recipe for some amazing amazing terpy extracts. Yeah. So
I mean, that's the dream. I mean, that whole team there is all my age legacy operators that are been in the game and been proper, and did everything right through all those other years, and everything right through the licensing years. And the biggest struggle we have is trying to navigate the California landscape. I mean, honestly, we're always going to, unless there's an act of God, of a fire or a flood, we're going to come in with the crop. We know how to get our concentrates done. It's just, will the industry allow us to keep operating each year? And this was one of those tough years where cannabis prices really plummeted hard, and the regulatory bodies of California are merging into one, but yet you still have these really extremely high taxes. You're looking at a $2.50 county pre-planting tax just from the county. So if you have 100,000 square feet, that's $250,000 before you plant. Say your plants all die, that one's paid for. So there's just some real risks out there where, someone who's just basically a cannabis kid who grew up starting with a closet garden and just an enthusiast, to get to this level sometimes trips me out a bit, where you're like, man, look where we've come. But then you're like, look at this next turn in the road, But keep it up. I would say, looking behind you, you've done a pretty fabulous job with the tent structures back in there. You do got some fine looking plants, not all netted up real bad either. So, it's nice not seeing a plant trellised up completely. But in terms of making it happen, I mean, San Luis Sun Grown, that place is, if we didn't trellis it up, the stuff would be flopping immediately, because the plants just don't have that structure. They don't get any wind. They get some fans, so it's definitely a controlled environment,
strain dependent too. Some strains just have to be supported. There's just some of them that just won't even support themselves, that they're really good strains, but definitely have to support. Billy Brew, for example, she can stretch, but once she gets so big, she wants to collapse on herself. There's a lot of strains out there that It just undoubtedly happens.
It's pretty amazing.
So, sorry,
Good.
go ahead. I didn't mean.
I was gonna just say that the strain selection, right, is amazing. Where I remember when cannabis wasn't even named, and then like the first dispensary we opened up, people didn't even ask us what the name was. They were just so glad that they could buy cannabis that they didn't even ask you. It took like 6 months of having this first store to where people are like, what's the name of this one? And what's the analytics? And you're like, well, we got a name, but we don't have any testing yet. But the where strains have gone is pretty unbelievable. The crosses and the potencies and the colors, the fruity smells, were, a lot of cakes, a lot of cookies, a lot of breaths, around these days.
So when you decided to switch over to the extract side of things, which was your first method? How'd you start out on that side of things?
The classic bubble hash, right? And, that was pretty much the very first method. And the goal was always to try to make hash that, growing up with my parents and whatnot, they always would have these little bricks of hash that were really unique, right? You'd get a piece of it and it was dark, break it open, it was kind of greenish tan inside and crumble up. And we started making bubble hash out of trim. That was pretty much straight up. I mean, I was actually going through my photo album a little while back and looking at pictures from maybe 17, 18 years ago, spinning bubble hash and having buckets lined up and, trying to make it happen. And which we still do, but, in a more refined way than just dropping it in and with a paint bucket and spin it with the drill. So, but that method was first because it was easy access and you could get those parts at a hardware store. And that was that. And then butane came down the road. And the first open blast that you saw, you're like, man, I don't know about that. Seems like a pretty sketchy solvent to be sending through that marijuana and smoking it. Why would you take that great medicinal marijuana and send butane through it? And after, I don't know, seeing maybe 8 to 9 years, maybe even a decade of refinement, it's amazing what a hydrocarbon solvent can do, to the cannabis plant. But we went from solventless to CO2, and that was primarily because of trying to do hydrocarbon in particular, with particular licensing areas where I would happen to be working in was never really that easy. And the machines themselves, the instruments and equipment wasn't nearly as safe and certified and regulated and allowed. So hydrocarbons really come a massive way. It always was the best solvent to use, if you ask me. I mean, we can get to that conversation with combinations of propane and butane, but let's just say those particular two solvents are so efficient. And you look at the fact that you can just make THCA crystals and just have them drop out of your HTE solution and do it one step, where you could have a pharmaceutical company trying to make THCA and running it through a massive process of chemistry processes, from like a crude to where all you could do is take it, send it through one solvent. If you basically, the rudest way to put it in a jar and let its own pressure build on itself and cure and watch the diamonds fall out, it's pretty amazing. And I will say I'm gravitating towards it more and more, right? Running the hash side was always the cured cannabis, right? We're talking pre-frozen, before you froze your stuff live. So making hash out of trim. Then you start making CO2 oil. In the end, you come up with a decent cured terpene if you do this well, but you end up with making distillate in the end, and you combine the two and you come with a pretty decent product that we've all have good versions of it and had some pretty decent versions. So we do have a really nice, solid cured pen cartridge, but you make beer, you got to make seltzer, you make whiskey, you got to make vodka at some time. So moving into the live side of it all, we've turned the hash projects into live actual, now using frozen product for your live rosin and your bubble hash or water hash. And obviously the hydrocarbon world just went crazy once you started using cold columns and frozen material. And the products coming out of there right now are pretty damn awesome, I'll have to say. So the change was that, man, I was growing my whole life, and you're always like, and I'll be real, like in high school, I lived in Montana. So you go to ski in Canada and you would trade your weed for hash because the Canadians didn't have any weed and all they had was hash and all you had was weed and no hash. And so that was like your big trip of the year, is to trade what weeds you could up in Canada for some hash and come home. And after growing for a long time and making bubble hash, I got together and, used some chemistry experience and put together a staff, and we started just, extracting. And I knew it was one of those things where, you open up that box and you could really go down the rabbit hole. If you look at some of these forums and conversations about extracting and the nuances, and it can go on forever. There's really no right answer there, but there's a lot of strong, beliefs in what people want to do and opinions. And you can look at solventless CO2 and hydrocarbon. It's kind of like skiers and snowboarders and rollerbladers and skateboarders getting along. They're all having a jamming day, but they ride something different. And they all look at each other like that's weird. But in the end, I'm seeing we're trying to mesh that right now, right? Big Sur Extracts has a live rosin drop. It started with the sun drop, which was a CO2 product. And that still is out there moving. You've got the Star Drop, which is our live resin. And then you got the Dew Drop, which is just coming out now in Colorado, which is our live rosin. So we have one dab company. It does dabs only with all three disciplines with the same strain from the same farm. That was my way of quelling all the banter of what method is the best.
That's pretty awesome. So when things go like completely national across the board where weed's legal, so do you think will that be your angle on that, because it'll be easier for interstate shipping and shit like that versus flower? I think you'll gear more towards extracts because you'll be able to ship from state to state, hopefully at that time, and make like a national brand. Or will you gear kind of keep one foot in the flower market as well?
I mean, that's a tough one, Eagle, right? But in the end, we go back to saying, like my first comment was here tonight, was the farm is everything. Can't have good concentrates if you don't have good biomass going in. So somewhere there's got to be a good farm in the chain there, right? So never going to stop growing, right? Took 5 years of my life from 2015 to 2020. Yeah. So this will just under 5 years of my life. I actually quit managing my own farms and work with partners and friends that we all work together and let them handle the farming side of it all, while I push the concentrate side of the business with my farming friends. And then, over time, everybody wants to do a lot of things themselves. And so that's kind of how that works, right? I'll be real. The cannabis industry does have a lot of bosses, and that's good. You've got to do everything, man. You're running your podcast, you're running a farm, but you're also running your, a business. You got many stages of that farm. So you're vertically integrated right now as a caregiver, right? What other outsourcing are you using between you and your patient?
None. It is all me right here. And I had to, because of them numbers that, well, I love the garden I run now, but I run a perpetual, but I had to learn a perpetual because of those numbers. There's no way that I could, and again, grower to grower, I mean, we know you can't go through the process with 72 plants, run them all at once, and then go, all I got off that is 15 ounces off 72 ounces. Well, you're a shitty ass grower. You should stop.
Straight up.
So in order to kind of keep things, right, I had to learn to perpetual harvest to keep, and because I do it all myself, I have to keep a little bit here and there. I can't have these long periods where I'm stuck trimming forever, and then that's got to be enough. This is the way I prefer to work, is the perpetual, and it helps keep me in my numbers. Once every month there's that harvest, and as quickly as I can get it to the patients, I get it to the patients, and then hopefully am I stuck with my 15 to hold on to in case they need more to tide them over to the next month. So It's pretty vertically integrated around here, but it's a labor of love, and
That's
what
this.
else can we ask for?
I threw that at you because it's the same. Everyone who knows what they're doing in this industry had to sit at where you are at this time, and we all have, if you've completed the circle. So that's just the part of the new side, I think, that a lot of everyone's missing, right? People are like, oh, I just do this, I just do that. So I kind of follow that path too. I'm like, well, I'll just sit back and I'll put the time and energy in and really get our game on with doing extractions and concentrates. And then you do finally realize, man, it's all about the plant, the farm, where it comes from, what I'm getting in my pocket, what I'm getting in my bag, what I'm getting to give to my patients. It all comes from the farm. I can't, like, concentrates, you can't change it into something that it isn't. So it's got to come to you good. And if it goes federally legal, and if it does, man, that it's almost scary to think of, because I can barely hold on to my shorts as it is. And will you be able to, will a group of legacy operators be able to hold on to that much, exposure to, something that scale? So, and I see everybody gearing up for it. And I actually consult a lot of the larger companies, because that's my side hustle, to build everything I have. And, they have the same problems the little guy does, but they've never been little. So they can't figure it out, but I don't know.
I like the way you nonchalantly said side hustle. You already seem like you're one incredibly busy guy, or have a lot of things going. To say you have a side hustle on all of what you got going is pretty impressive.
To try to stay, real to what we're doing. Not say stay real, but to you have to take on investment. You have to take on partners. It's like, if you're looking at your change, that next bridge. It's just being able to get as much of your own into it, because it's not so much a money and what you get at the end of the day. It's control of your vision. And a lot of new people and new energy in cannabis don't have that vision that was ingrained from actually growing up in the community. And it's important to keep that. And there's definitely weed karma out there. I've had a chance to work with the larger name public people, and you see what they're doing. And as a person like me, I walk in like, my God, look, they've got 500,000 square feet and they have everything that you could imagine. But yet you're like, look at the weed. You're like, man, kind of looks like, eh. And it just kind of sits right there. You need somebody from the cannabis legacy operating level, or someone who's just operating at your space, that's been vertically integrated with the circle on your responsibility. So it's like, that's where cannabis is editing itself right now. What's keeping us and a guy like my size in the game is that, people still want really good products. People want to know where it came from. There's still a group of the community is always fighting back, I think, to let people know where their products come from, put a good message out there, do some work to give back to the community. You're seeing this side of the industry still actually holding that down. It hasn't gotten out of control. We definitely haven't lost the industry yet. That's for sure. There's definitely some big players that we'll never go to lunch with, but imagine all the large beer companies and all the microbreweries starting at the same starting line at once, right? That's really what just happened here. So you got craft, and everyone's vision is packed into one starting line right now. And that's a unique situation.
So I can't help but ask this of most of the people that I interview that are in your spot, bigger growers. Are you afraid? Is there any fear, I guess? Is there any fear of the federally going legal, as in like one more bowling down, one more refinement of who jumps, another hoop to jump through, I guess? Are you worried that they'll come in and just change everything across the board? Okay, your state rules are great, but this is the way we do it across the board now, and nobody really is accepted yet. So everybody has to start over with our rules, our legislation. Do you think there's going to be one more big reset with federal legalization?
I mean, man, that's the crystal ball and the answer I think we all would like to know, but I'd probably have to say yes, right? I got saying earlier, I get kind of worried about it because like you just said, I can't believe you have enough time for a little side hustle. I don't know how I could ever handle any more workload. And not just that, so you get more people involved. Well, great. Then communication. And we just talked about that. Unless every location can have someone like you or me that's really in the industry and can answer all the little tight questions that no one would have, because there isn't a university for cannabis yet, right? There isn't. You go headhunt a bunch of people. You need 100 employees. You can go right to ZipRecruiter and you can do that now in cannabis, right? But you're dealing out people's personal resumes and trying to figure out, you try to interview these people and figure out how in the game they are. Do they really grow, or do they have a friend that grew and they just said they did, because there's no degrees, right? So it's not easy to just knock out a new 100 employee, recruiting roster. So like there's barriers of entry, pretty big barriers of entry for a lot of us, till there is, how many friends do you know that grow great weed? I got a pretty good Rolodex, but they're all bosses and got their own game going. So it's not like we're all going to join up and do one big company. So man, that's going to be a rough haul to expand that way, I think.
So you kind of brought out another question. As somebody that runs a bigger operation, would you prefer people like real growers, I guess? And like you said, it is harder to weed them out. Or would you prefer basically the college educated grower that there's a good chance you may have to argue your method with, you know?
You're right there, right on that one. When it comes to the chemistry side, I'd say take the newbie, because you're trying to teach something, a process. When it comes to the plant, you have to teach somebody, or someone has to come with this instinct, right? To know what to do, or not be afraid to do something with the plant. So that comes with experience. So I'd rather hire experienced people from the growing side, but you got to, probably spend more time on the interview with personal preferences and make sure there's no egos clashing, right? A lot of alphas that are running their own shows, because to be yourself, you're the boss, the crew, everything. Besides, I'm sure you have a few people helping you on larger moves of, during your cycles. But, dang, that's a lot of, you put a lot of good people in the room. It's hard to keep everyone friendly with each other sometimes. But the growing thing would be, my method is at each state that I've worked with, besides these, like especially Washington, that was a group of friends that everyone knew what they're doing really well. If I was to expand in another state right now, I'd rather find the best local grower I can find that's in my network, and just see if he's compatible to grow at a larger scale. It's definitely, I can only handle so much, and you find people doing similar things, you can collaborate together and make things better instead of butt heads. So I think
I
I
could
picked
definitely see egos coming into play there, but I don't know. Maybe it's all the years I've wrestled for a long time. So wrestling's a double sport. It's an individual sport. You go out there and you're looking for your individual win, but you're also scoring points for the team win as well. So but I would think if you had a good team, uh, much like wrestling, the ego would only come out when you stepped on the mat and for your match. Which, like, I could see a bunch of growers. The ego should disappear when you're at work, because you know what I mean. You're growing the same plants, but if you're like out of work, maybe a little room for ego, because now you're smoking what's out of my personal garden. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily how it's done or whatever, but during work hours when we're all working with the same plant, the ego should be right across the board, I think. And I think there's there's good growers out there that I think would mesh in that aspect. I think much less there's great people that you put together on teams like that. And it's for the greater good.
Right there, you just described what we're all looking to find, right? Our friends and connections of friends that have that exact same skill level that want to look at it for the greater good of doing something bigger on a team, because you just nailed it. You can only get so far by yourself, and we all did. And to go to all these other places, you need to bring on your team. So, you know, that was really well said. But that's something I'm always looking for. Put together the team and keep it. And it's a lot of work, because you see people, once they learn what's going on, there's this flood in the market where a lot of people then like branch off to do their own thing, and then you may come back together again. But cannabis opened up such a frenzy, right, to where, I mean, people, you just saw such a rush of cannabis growth. And so i think it's all gonna stabilize out a little bit better. And I'm watching, I mean, I'm in Humboldt County, and that's got a lot of history. And you see a lot of people that would never not mingle together in the same company umbrella, but would now, because there is a survival thing. Everyone did really good in the early days, and then the white markets really beat everybody up because everybody tried to be individuals still, like the old world. And it's the industry's too big for a single one farm and an individual. So co-oping together and bringing together real collaborations is kind of by necessity now. So it's kind of that's kind of probably a good phase that the industry's going through.
Well, I hope that everything goes well for you as cannabis goes more and more legal.
And you.
But thank you. I appreciate that. I can't help but they've mentioned it in chat. Now you've got to give these people in that house a shout out, because they've been talking what amazing background you've had all through chat tonight, man.
Who's
That
that
is
from?
a cool place. You're there. There's been multiple people that's said, "Man, what an awesome background he's got going there," and that place you're staying in is pretty awesome. So you want to give a shout out to the house and where you're staying, man. And the more I've looked at that door, because I'm a carpenter by trade, and
Yeah,
I
right.
do finer woodworking. That the inlay on that door, the bottles in the wall, the tree, it's all so cool, man.
I
So we
know.
want to give a shout out to the where you're staying in that house, because it is
Oh yeah,
super.
yeah. It's called the Piece of Art House, and it was a piece of art cafe, and then converted into a house. And like I said, we got lucky, and the universe dealt us this place where, like, where are we gonna live, man? It's really hard. We looked at a couple double wides outside of potato farms, and we're just some hippie people that just want to not, we're in a different community, right? We're in a definitely farming ag community. Cannabis is, up and down. The county I'm staying in right now does not have dispensaries, but 15 miles down the road where my farm is, at Saguache County, and they do, and we have farms. So I'm in like a dry county, so I drive over the county line to go work at the farm. But the lady here and man who owned this are very cool. We leased it and been paying for it for a month while I've been harvesting in California, and met them last night, had some appetizers and smoked a joint with them. I'm like, so we're all cool. But the house is amazing. Yeah, I've had a few people where the bottles go all the way through the wall. So there's two of them that go together. And so when the sun hits all the walls and throughout the day, it's a great stoner house. It's probably one of the best stoner houses I've been able to live at. So we're just renting, right? Because it's just cold right now. Living in the fifth wheel trailer as the temperatures hit 20 degrees and soon to be zero, it gets a little rough. So I'm trying not to rough it as bad. So I found a rental, got lucky and got a really cool rental. So yeah, the Piece of Art House. I think she even has a website for the place and whatnot. It's really cool. Great story behind it. Built by hand by this woman, and was a all natural cafe. Like, and there was nothing in this area like that, right? Because it's mostly like just diner kind of style food, where she kind of came in with organic food and tried to push that whole thing here, and I think did fairly well. But without her, I can't say at all that it didn't catch on. We're just in a particular place where people have a different take on what's good to eat and whatnot. A lot of hunting, great elk hunting here. So if you like elk meat and deer, which I love, that's big time in this county that we're at right now. So California, this would be a common place, right? Organic veggies growing on the farm out back, grass-fed beef from in the county. Like one thing I'll say about Humboldt is that that county could live on its own, right? It's got seafood because it touches the ocean. It's got great beef and dairy. So cheese and vegetables, like it really could be its own world if it got cut off from anywhere else. Super sustainable.
Yeah, I can't help but think that you wake up pretty inspired walking around there. It's got to be one of them places you wake up, look around, have that cup of coffee, and look around, be like, man, I gotta think of something creative to do today.
So
Just
I'll be
fire
real.
it up.
This is night 4 for me in the house, right? That's how new it is for us. So like, yeah, it's totally inspiring. I still all day look at the bottles and look through them, and I'm all like, man, this place is crazy. And I've had a couple of Zoom meetings with some business folks, and everyone's been like, man, what's going on behind you? Like, so yeah, we're cool with this. I'm glad it's getting some publicity. The woman who built the house would just be tickled knowing that. So I'll be sure to
I
pass it
was
on.
pleased to know that it was an actual thing, to be honest with you. Because when you came on, I was admiring it. I'm like, man, that is super cool. Please tell me that's like just not like a virtual background. And I was very pleased to know that it was an actual place you were staying at. That is very cool. Very
Yeah. So I'm feeling good about this. We're 3 weeks away from our third harvest at San Luis Sungrown. And so we're getting the building working well. And it's, just like anything, you build you get into something new, you gotta, even though and have experience, you gotta break in the race car, and everything's been going smooth. Getting ready for some labor, right? Take down 1,008 plants at once. So we do the same thing. I don't perpetually run that. It's just to try to break it down and run the different cycles of plants. For me, it's just easier to, with my plant count, just take down 1,008 and repack that thing as quickly as possible, and try to pull 4 harvests a year, but it's more like 3.5 a year that you get out of it. The winter crop, that place needs to actually have some lights put into it. If we, probably will maybe do, I'm not sure. We've had 2 winter crops. Right now we're kind of have a late fall crop, but we did our first run, we took down at New Year's last year. And so running just sunlight there's some 315 ceramics in there that came with the property when I got it. So, so they're not at all helpful for flowering. They're basically just enough. And there's only 60 of them. There should be about 120. So it's really underlit facility, but it's really just meant for keeping the plants from going into keeping them in veg, during those, like this particular time, like replanting. But yeah, it can be a little rough in the winter. So we're debating, do we actually decide to make it an indoor place, just 1 run a year, and put some LEDs in there, and then we just run the sun the rest of the year. So we're kind of getting faced with that decision, probably, coming here soon. I'm going to slow down. We're going to pull down this crop in December. We're going to wait till the 1st of March to get on a better cycle, so we can get 3 clean harvests out with the sun without needing much supplemental light, and also getting the maximum we can out of our, best solar time of the year. And then we'll go over probably, in July, we can decide, hey, we could outfit the place with some LEDs and decide just to close the curtains and run an indoor facility for that 1 crop a year, just to keep it valuable. And so it's good. Honestly, the winter crop's tough, right? The sun comes really flat on the earth, and being a light depth facility, the side walls are blacked out. So you got a lot of shadows. So it really does need some supplemental lighting in the winter, but we're pushing through.
I'm glad you brought up the winter grow. Have you noticed a difference in the same strain from summer to winter? From like a different spectrum from the sun?
100%. Seeing it today as underneath the plants, and you know, it's a whole different trimming process too, you know, or grooming, right? Some doing some defoliation and the, you know, right at the late stages of veg. Let's see, you know, after 2 weeks of veg, we go into flower. So within that month period, you're removing leaves, trying to guide the plant into the, you know, many heads as you can. So you really notice that the crew, my guy Clay and myself, kind of slacked off a little because I was in Humboldt for this last month, and we didn't really defoil the plants as much because I had such a solid bud production in the summer, and I had all the bud sites that I really wanted to see, but that bottom third of the plant just didn't even need to be there. That the plant really stretched out in the places it wasn't getting the sun, obviously to try to get to the sun, and but yeah, completely different, man. They'll stretch at different times too. Well, they'll sit really squatty in veg, and then they'll go into flower, and they may shoot up and have their bud nodes 8 to 10 inches apart, where you're like, oh my gosh, I just grew, you know, 4 feet of stem for one top bud and 4, you know, nugs going down the stem. So I've seen some interesting stuff. We had some gorilla breath our first round is in the winter, and they're like 8-foot tall plants, but I'll have to send you a picture of them. It was just, they just stretched like no other. And then we ran that in the summer, and it ran tight nodes and, you know, ran 10, 12 inch solid bud structure. But in the winter, they stretched out to 2 feet with that same bud spread out. So you definitely see it.
We're hitting the 2-hour mark right now. I just want to check in with you, see how we're doing, because
Yeah.
trust me, I could probably keep you going all night long if you give me the opportunity. So I just wanted to check in and see how we're doing for time, and if you had to go, if we could, because this has been a great episode. If we're pressed for time, I just want to tell you right now, I'd love to get you back for another one-on-one, because what an awesome guy. And I gotta tell you, I got a lot of respect for you. I appreciate you as a person, and I appreciate you for somebody that has started from a humble grower to pulling yourself up to, you know, where you are now. It's pretty impressive, and you know, gives us all hope. Gives us all hope, you know, that it can be done.
Appreciate that. I mean, listen, I'll be real. I 2 hours blew right by. It's pretty comfortable. I like talking to the right people, and also, you know, it's just the time where, you know, cannabis, like I was saying, that the industry has a chance for the way it's going to stay on the path of good craft product and good things. And so I don't know, I'm at that point where it's time to talk about it more with other people. You know, it's like this part of the vision now. Yeah, you ask how the vision can go this long, is that it kind of just keeps evolving. And so I feel like that's the path to keep pushing, you know, camaraderie, collaborations. And if go back to your statement of, you know, put together a team and of people going to team, if you could literally, you say you could have this giant corporation that has all this, you know, one guy handling all these different things, but if you could bring in the whole army of friends and integrate all the pods together, you really could build the biggest cannabis company there is, and keep it fully OG. And that's really the option we have if you're not gonna, you know, step up and go with some big public route or become the boss at that company, because you'll never get to build that dream there. So in a wild way, maybe it could happen. Who knows? It's good talking about.
The Cannabis Mastermind Circle is what that sounds like. You ever listen to any Napoleon Hill?
No, I need to check into that.
He's a motivational speaker from the early 1900s, and he talks about basically utilizing your strengths. He's talking about everything you're talking about right there, realizing that you can't be the whole team, and sometimes you have to utilize your strengths and figure out where your faults are, and have the confidence to bring in other people to fill you in your faults area. A mastermind team, a complete circle, so it can move forward. Everybody can concentrate on the strengths versus, you know, having just struggle with, balancing your strengths and faults. You got to know, in order to move on, be able to put people in your weaknesses and have some trust there to everybody move forward. It's a good book if you've never read it.
That there lies the thought. Listen, at the 2-hour marks where I'll probably cut it because I got an early morning, and yeah, I've had a killer time. We should continue to chat and keep up, and I'll share a little more just media stuff to back up kind of some of the things we talked about, so you can kind of get a better picture of like the farm out in Cali and what we're doing here, and show you some more of our concentrate side. Just, I don't know. I don't like to utilize and capitalize on talks like this on branding and things like that. I like talking about what we just did, but I'm more than happy for people to see what we're building and what we're doing. And, we've gone over how, I don't know, the vibe, the lifestyle, and the vision all comes together.
Well, you said it earlier, and the chats I've got some pretty good mods. They've been hitting your website, your Instagram. They've been linking it all night long in the chat. So they've been pushing you all night long without you knowing. But that's the thing here, man. And you've already said it. Once you get to know somebody's genuine, it's easier to stand by their brand or whatever they're doing because they're a genuine good person and not somebody out there trying to get over on you. So it's easier, and I don't mind now, especially knowing and meeting you as a person. I feel better about you coming forth and pushing a brand, your business, or whatever, because I feel it's more genuine. You know what I'm saying? It's easier to fall behind the product when you know the person.
That's the point, and that's the goal, right? And not lose it, not get too big too fast. How can you hold on to this vibe that you have right now? But yeah, man, I really appreciate the time that you gave me and hitting me up and the support from your followers. So tell everybody thanks, and thank you so much, man, for giving me a couple hours to chat. But we should fire up again, man. I honestly, maybe we wait till I finish up the harvest and we could talk early December, and I don't know, chat a little bit more about just where we're going and things like that. And I'm here to share and do my thing. And I'm telling you, Michigan, you guys got a lot of good things coming your way if you guys can come together and get yourself on that platform. And there lies, that hard quest.
You might be a bigger grower, but I consider you to be community, not the industry.
I don't want to get labeled into that. That's that's been my hardest thing. And I've been trying to hold back, and I've missed a lot of bigger, probably financial opportunities with companies that have offered me those jobs that I would have gotten this massive salary, but booted after a year after they drained me of all my information or had a bad year and blamed it on me, because that's just what goes on in that side of the world. So I've just tried to hold it down, so I appreciate you noticing that. That makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to go over before I let you go. And that's how things work around here. Cool. Much like building a team or anything else, we're trying to build our there's not a good word. We're building a community here, but it's a terrible word for it. So basically what happens here is there's the spotlight episodes that we've done tonight. And like I told you earlier, the time slot usually goes from 11:30 to 4:20 my time. And this is how it works. We'll go end the show tonight, and I'll end the rest of the night with what I call Weed Nerd World. Weed Nerd World is basically a panel-ish type show, but it's only open to past guests. As of right now, this is episode 518. So that means there could be a possibility of 518 guests at any one time. It's never that large, but what I'm telling you is basically keep this Zoom link, and anytime that Monday nights, it's a Weed Nerd World. I don't do a spotlight on Mondays. It's just the Weed Nerd World. That's so everybody can count on hanging out if they want to hang out on that particular day. The rest of the nights, it depends on the guests. You know what I mean? The guest doesn't take me all the way through, then there's a Weed Nerd World. So
Got
anytime there's Weed Nerd World in a title, you're more than welcome to join in. No invitation. It's, hey, I just want to come hang out with you guys, talk cannabis or whatever you guys are talking about. Hopefully, at some point, you can join in, hang out with us. If not, I would greatly like to do another one-on-one with you. That would be completely amazing. So I just
Yeah.
want to announce that aspect of the show. There's three aspects of the show here, by the way, or the things that go on this channel. There's the one-on-one spotlight with me and a guest. There's the We Nerd World, and of course, there's the intellectual side of things with Smiley's Gardens, and that's the organic takeover. And he does an episode once a month where he talks just straight up regenerative soil, how the plant works, and pretty much bring your notepad type episodes. So that's what goes on here on the channel. So I just wanted to let you know what happens here, and you're more than welcome to participate in any way you see fit. So I just wanted to let you know that once you become a part of this show, that you've become part of the community, and it
Like,
is, we care a lot about each other here, and so welcome, I guess, on that aspect of it. The second thing I'd like to go over with you before you go is I do this corny thing, I guess. It's kind of the old school radio sound bites back when you sure you remember back in the day where I'd be like, hey, this is Bon Jovi and I'm on 105.5. But
right.
basically, I'm looking for something along the lines of like, hey, this is Eagle and I'm on fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 518. I understand you're a businessman. So if you'd like to leave that fucking off this part of it, I can completely understand. You can do whatever you want with it, as long as it has that in the body of it. Remember, this will at some point be a commercial for this here episode. So with that being said, I am recording. Anytime you're nice enough to give me that sound bite.
All right. This is Brent, and I'm hanging out and chilling with Eagle. Wait, give me one more. I might have got off on that one.
Take two.
Wait a second. What you want from me is make sure my name, the Eagle Show, and bang something. I'm there.
Preferably,
Overthinking it. You gave me
this
too
is
much eat in.
preferably minimum this. Hey, this is Britt,
Oh,
and I'm on fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 518. That's
oh,
what I'm
got,
kind of looking for.
okay.
Minimum. You can make it your own, do whatever you want.
Got that. All right, man. This is Brent on episode 518, talking fucking shit with Eagle and having a chilling time and enjoying myself.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend. This has been an amazing episode. Much like the phone call, once we talked on the phone, I knew it was going to be a good one. I've been looking forward to this, and you sure did deliver. So thank you very much for your time. It's the most valuable thing we have, and I can't repay you for the hours you've given me. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you and your group putting this all together, man. You guys have a killer evening. Enjoy. And I'll see you on Weed. That just sounds good.
I appreciate that. I hope so. If not, we'll definitely plan on that episode near December sometime. See how that harvest came out.
Keep in touch, man, and we'll be dropping pictures. I'm just finally starting to post again because, when the plants are in veg and small, it's not super anything exciting. So we're getting into, day 40, day 42. So moving on, I'll be posting new stuff, daily by daily right now, back to the, everyday posts again. So I appreciate you giving us a chance to talk about the farm and our experiences. So you have a great evening. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you letting us in. So you have a great night. We'll talk again soon.
All right, later, guys. Peace. Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys watching. If you're not going to join in the Weed Nerd World portion of things, thank you for your time. Thus ends this episode. Remember, random acts of kindness do save lives. I'm a living, breathing example of that. Please try to do something nice for somebody. And I will see you in a few in the week.